Welcome back. This time we're talking about Agents of S.H.E.I.L.D. Season 4, Episode 7, Deals with Our Devils. Now this episode picks up not only after a 3-week break, but also after the big revelation that Robbie's uncle Eli was actually the bad guy in the whole Darkhold business. Of course, the last episode also left Coulson, Fitz, and Robbie out of phase and literally sinking into another dimension. And I have to say, this was a very busy episode, but also a very entertaining one. Between the action, the story development, the character interactions, pretty much everything. I really enjoyed this episode. Especially how they kind of doubled up on time. Showing events in our dimension, and then replaying them as some combination of Coulson, Fitz, and Robbie watched on, unable to interact with the rest of our cast. I also want to credit the writers for some solid dramatic moments as well as some great comic relief without any drastic tonal shifts in between. Now, as I said, there was a lot of things that happened in this episode, but potentially the biggest, aside from our heroes being rescued from whatever dimension they were stuck in, was that Ada read Darkhold and gained its power. Something I just don't see ending well, either for her or any of our other friends at S.H.E.I.L.D. It seems like we're reaching ahead when it comes to Robbie and Ghost Rider's story, because this episode ends with Robbie returning from whatever dimension Ghost Rider's from and recruiting Mac to help him settle his last score, namely Eli. Now, Ada and Robbie are definitely the biggest loose threads going into the winter finale next week. But there's plenty of other things that happened in this episode, and I want to touch on a few. First of all, I mentioned in my review of the previous episode that I was wondering whether Gabe was going to find out that Eli was bad before meeting up with Eli. Of course, we find out very early in this episode that Gabe knows. And he's dealing with the emotional trauma of finding out that his uncle is bad and that his brother is essentially a fire-breathing killer. Moving next to Simmons, she spent most of the episode on her own, stuck on a mission the director sent her on so he could buy Senator Nadir's silence over Ghost Rider's actions at the prison. And that mission involves her investigating an Inhuman who is still stuck in his Terrigenesis cocoon 7 months after his transformation. Of course, she doesn't know any of the particulars around this mission, but she is able to actually help him, so much so that he wakes up right before she's whisked away. And as I'm still on the fence about the new director and his ultimate allegiances, so I found it very interesting to see just how affected he was when he discovered that he could not get in contact with Simmons. I also thought this was a strong episode for the other half of our favorite couple. Fitz had some great moments as they were trying to figure out just what happened to them. And he also took it to the director after their rescue, confronting him on the fact that the director had sent her on a mission that he had no control over. But perhaps his best moment is this conversation with Coulson, when he describes Coulson's decision to step down as director as quitting, and likening it to Daisy running away. And as for Coulson and May, we got a few more hints about a potential relationship blossoming between the two. Of course, that depends if you really believe she was talking about opening the bottle when she bemoaned the fact that she and Coulson keep waiting. And finally, coming nearly full circle, we have Mac, who was briefly possessed by Ghost Rider. And it's obvious that the experience deeply affected him, much more so than it apparently affected Robbie, at least for the brief moments that we got to see him away from Ghost Rider. And Mac's possession ends when Robbie agrees to help Ghost Rider settle his scores, as long as he helps him settle his final one, again, Eli. Which again leads us back to the winter finale. And Agents of S.H.E.I.L.D. has been a show that really pulls off its mid-season finales pretty well, almost as well as it does its season finales. And as I've mentioned before, this is a show that really does seem to break its seasons into two. So I'm curious just how many of these storylines will be completely settled at the end of next week's episode. Because we already have a potentially half-season arc with the issue with Ada and her powers from Darkhold. So I'm curious to see if this is going to be the end of Ghost Rider or not. Of course, the only way to find out is to wait and watch. So until then, what did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? As always, you can subscribe to my channel, check out some of my other reviews, and until next time, try to stay in phase.